one, yeah. Cha 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 cha. Imo pues one, yeah. Oko nyamini, nyamini.
And that is done with the Nigerian
Congo nyamiri, nyamiri, Coco nyamiri, nyamiri, Ibole, Ibole, Ibobono, Ndamami he, Ibole, Ibole, Ibobono, Ndamami he, Ebulanyelu, 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 Anamabara na ihe dị njọ ma na-emezi konye ofeke Anamabara nụ n'ihe dị njọ ma na-emezi konye ofeke Igbo bụ ndị ike ụmụ Igbo bụ ndị ike ụmụ Igbo bụ ndị ike ụmụ Igbo bụ ndị ike
Ndewonu. How's everybody doing out there? My name is DBL Charger Udemezwe Onyoha, and I'll be your host today for Chasing Live. But before we go on, let's say a prayer, so that we can invite Chineke's blessing in our midst as we discuss our topic today. OKDBia is not available. She has some challenges that she has to deal with health-wise, but we pray that she's going to be well and be back on the show next weekend. Otito niile dịrị Chineke, ọbasi dị elu, Chukwu obiọma, Chidiebere, Olisa nwa amara. Ka ụzọ anyị niile bụrụ ihe, ka ihe ọbụla kpatara aka ka ọ bụrụkwa ahụ mma mma, ka ụwa niile site n'ozi a, ozi ọma Mobi aṅụrị site ugbu a ruo mgbe na-ebighị ebi ọfọ ya gazie iseo. All praises to Chi, the creator, the supreme being, Chi the good, Chi the merciful, Chi the magnificent, with grace. Let everywhere of our lives be light, let all our acts be crowned with good, and may the world prosper from our ministry, now and forever. So let it be. Amen. Today's topic is heavy. It's really, really very heavy. It's not easily. It's not one of those topics that you could just give a broad definition to or broad explanation to without thinking of the caveats and also the dark side of why Nigerians are successful immigrants wherever they go, outside of their communities, whether it's your village, your county, your state, your country, or your continent. Why is it that we are successful outside of our own environment? See, that's the caveat right there. And when did this attitude, when did this success begin? Is it a product of colonization? But when we're talking about Nigerians, we're not talking about slavery. Although to me, slavery and colonization is one and the same. Being colonized is you're being colonized, excuse me, in your own land, and the transatlantic slave trade is you being taken away from your motherland and taken to outside lands, to be used or for labor and what have you. This topic is deep, and before we continue, let me bring in my co-host today, Dibia Chiodozie Okoro. Imari? Okay, Madu. You're looking good. I like the hat, the blue, the ensemble. I mean, look at you, man. Next thing I know, I'll see you in a magazine modeling African clothes. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll be your second job. Apart from being a professor at 2 institutions, your next foray will be in the modeling world. So more power to you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, today's topic is deep, and it's not a topic that I celebrate like most people. You know, we brag about, oh, we're so successful in America, blah, 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 blah. I don't brag about that. I don't celebrate it. But before we really delve into it, let's just look at some of the attitudes that we have as Nigerians, because this is about Nigerians. It's not about Kenyan people and how successful they are outside, blah, blah, blah. We do know that statistically speaking, Nigerians, when you talk about the global human community, we are more successful per capita outside of Nigeria than any other group, whether you're South African in America, whether you're Kenyan, whether you're from Senegal, you know, Cameroon, it doesn't really matter. We have just pegged success outside of our own communities back home, in foreign lands, in the United States, in Europe, Britain. As a matter of fact, there's hardly any country in this world that I know that you can go to and you don't have more Nigerians in it than any other group of Africans in that specific country outside of Africa. If you go to Japan, I guarantee you, you're going to see more Nigerians, particularly Igbo people. You know what I'm talking about there, than you would see any other group. So what is the attitude of African parents when it comes to their children, when it comes to wealth, you know, particularly generational wealth? You know, in Igbo land, at least where I come from, and this is post-colonization mentality, okay? I need to kind of stress that, post-colonization mentality. Generational wealth is not that important to the Igbo man. What is important to the Igbo parents, Igbo man or woman, is education. How educated can they get their offsprings to be? What level of education can they attain? And what discipline, as far as education is concerned, are the children going to be involved in? You know, my daddy always told us a story that when he was a kid, his dad said to him, Kamalo, asem ge gula akwụkwọ ti disuru moku bekee. Nse ge gula akwụkwọ tangorogo di menganga. Which simply means, I'm not asking you to get an education just so you could come out and speak all the big grammar and English and all that stuff. You know, my grandpa is a villager. He was a hunter and a wrestler in the village. He says, I just want you to go to school so that I could brag with you. There's something about bragging with your children's accomplishment that is so part of our DNA as Igbo people, as Nigerians. And I really focus on Igbo people because I'm Igbo. I don't really know what that means to the Yorubas because, you know, maybe Dr. Dibe Chidiozie can elaborate on that. You know, I've never lived in Lagos. I've visited Lagos, but everything I've ever done has been in Eastern Nigeria, except for my forays outside of the country. I've never lived up north, so I don't know how the Hausa or the Fulani or even the Calabar person in the eastern part of Nigeria may feel about what I'm saying and how true it relates to them. But as an Igbo man, I can tell you that. Not only that, getting a bachelor's degree is expected. It's an expectation. It's not a big deal. Now, getting a master's degree or a PhD, that's on another level. And for them, they could brag a little bit more about their children having a master's. Oh, my son or my daughter is a doctor. He has a master's degree, blah, 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 blah. It's bragging rights. Not only that, for Nigerians, as far as higher education is concerned, remember when we talk about this success, we're talking about higher education, how literate people are and how educated they are, not necessarily how much money they're making. Because a lot of people that are successful outside of Nigeria, they didn't go to college, but they have good business acumen and they're pretty successful as far as making money is concerned. So this is not necessarily about education, but I'm just stressing the education because that's what people usually talk about. The conversation is never, or for the most part, is never about how much money you got outside of Nigeria. It's always about what's your discipline outside of Nigeria. And then even inside of Nigeria, one thing that I could say about Igbo African parents is it's not really about you graduating or getting a PhD, which is important. It's just like a step 1, step 2, step 3, primary school, secondary school, university, get your BS degree, get your master's, then get your PhD. But along that comes with what kind of discipline are you in? Are you a lawyer? Are you a doctor? Are you an engineer? Lawyer, doctor, engineer in the sciences. But if you come to your parents and say, oh, I have a master's in mass communication, nobody gives, they're not bragging with that. Even though it's an accomplishment. But they're not gonna brag. And say, oh, my son has a PhD in sociology. Who gives a damn as far as they're concerned? My son has a PhD in engineering. That's what they're bragging. So if you're going to do any other discipline or attain, focus on any other discipline that is not legal, scientific, like doctor, engineers, lawyers, something like that, then you better have attained whatever discipline that you focused on to the highest degree. So they could at least say you have a doctorate. That's major accomplishment. But if you start with a BSc in sociology, your parents or your family is not going to brag about that. Unless maybe you foray into business and now you're making a whole lot of money, then maybe they could excuse, the idea that you have a degree in sociology. So it's about education, which is stressed more than anything else in African families. And specifically, Nigerian families over here, or people like us that come over here, get married, have our children here who, as far as their nationality is concerned, they're Americans. But their primordial core is African. But they're born here, they're Americans. And then within their family of having a Nigerian parent, they gravitate towards the idea that education is key. That's what is only important. That's the only thing that is important. How educated that you are, what kind of discipline that you are in. And then some parents who, when you complain about how difficult it is, some parents will say, that other student that made an A, do they have two heads? You probably heard that before.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying? And the answer is no. So that's pretty much telling you, if that kid can do it, you can do it. There's no excuse for failure as far as African family is concerned. There are certain expectations that are celebrated. And because there are certain expectations that are celebrated in the African family unit, particularly in diaspora, students tend to, go to school to attain that level of expectations that their parents have for them. Secondly, another reason why we're successful abroad is because of the conditions back home. The conditions back home push you to leave the country, which ordinarily, the only time you really want to leave your country is to go on vacation, not to seek opportunities outside because you don't have any opportunities at home. Knowing how difficult it is, once you leave to go abroad, now you got people back home depending on you to send money back home, to work hard so you could take care of your parents, maybe pay your brother and sister school fees, your cousins or whatever, keep your uncle alive. There's now a lot of pressure on you to be successful. And for you, as far as education is concerned, to be successful, you have to go to school and attain the highest level of academic excellence so that you can find yourself in an economic position where you're able to help those people back home. That's your story. We'll have different stories. Those that are born here, Nigerians that are born here, that attain a level of economic and academic excellence because of the pressure and expectations of the family, and those that come from Nigeria because of lack of opportunities back home to come over here to be successful because there are people that are dependent on them back home. Those are the two major reasons why you have Nigerians that are successful outside of Nigeria. But then there's a caveat to it. And that caveat is, how does that success outside Nigeria help Nigerians? How does it affect brain drain? Why do we leave Nigeria, come over here, attain success academically, economically, and otherwise, and then help to build our hosting country, to build America, to build Europe, and never go back to build anything in Nigeria? How is that a blessing? Over to you, Dibia Chidozie.
Usually when we study biology, we talk about the economic importance of even cockroach. And the truth of the matter is that when you look at the economic importance of cockroach, it's all destructive.
Yeah.
So you have summed it up all, because I don't see any economic benefit from drain other than people repatriate dollars and foreign currency back home.
Yeah.
And then along the line, those abroad, you have a lot of pressure on them because they hardly enjoy their money, especially if they are sent there. You have a lot of dependence here, people complaining the conditions here is getting worse and worse and worse, from bad to worse to fire to frying pan, from frying pan to fire. So this issue of Nigerians excelling ultimately, optimally abroad, but not doing so well back home, I like to trace it a bit from, because you have told the whole history. As you are talking, I started tracing the history. Remember, if one goes back to one of Achebe's novels, The Arrow of God, and then what you narrated, where Ezulu sent his son, his last son, Oduchi, to study the ways of the white man. That's white education. And then every 6 p.m., when the bell of the church rings, the son will abandon everything and rush to church. So one of these days, Ezulu asked Oduchi, said, "My son, this bell that each time it rings, you abandon everything in your home seed and run to church. What does it say?" And Oduchi responded by saying, the bell is ringing and singing, leave your yams and cocoa yams and come to church. Of course, Ezulu sighed heavily. And then he asked rhetorically, upon when the people leave, abandon their homestead, their yams and cocoa yams, and run to church, upon what will they feed when they return? So for me, it's a question of that from the inception of slave trade, then to colonialism, then to what we call independence and coloniality, post-coloniality, what we call post-independence and post-coloniality, we have not been able to deal with the factors that keep us looking towards the West or looking outwards.
Yes.
When the people are more abroad than in their home, it means their home is uncomfortable for them.
Yes.
And then I'll take that one first before I go to the reason that even being abroad does not even mean that they are able to take charge of situations at home.
True.
Okay, all right. So if you watch before the Civil War, from my own readings and investigations, before the Civil War, I don't think that the statistic does not show that Nigerians were brain draining abroad, because there were 4 regions, at least from about 1963-64, there are 4 regions, and each region was competing to put itself in the world map. So the tendency was the education was more homegrown, and only those that needed to go abroad to gather further knowledge on how to help the country went abroad.
Absolutely.
The craze then was the pursuit of Western education, which you have already narrated by saying your grandfather telling your father that he didn't send him to school so that he could come to speak grammar for him at home, but to brag with him that the son is in the schools, white man's school. Ezulu told the son the same thing when Ezulu was invited by the white administrator Mr. Winterbutter, and then he disregarded Ezulu's age, a very young man disregarded Ezulu's age, and Ezulu concluded by saying, well, I don't blame him. It is because he could write and speak. He was literate, and I am not literate. So my son, Edichi, you will go and learn the white man's way. You will learn how to write carelessly, carefreely, the way that young man was using his left hand to write and disregarded me, a whole Ezulu, with my age. So that was the penchant then. Because if you look at the history of the pursuit of Western education in Nigeria, us Igbo are in the hinterland. So the Westerners, the Yorubas, the Calaverians, and others at the coast first encountered Western education before us. Even at that, if you read Things Fall Apart and Arrow of God, we initially were not enthusiastic in sending our children to school. In fact, unlike other people that willingly embraced Western education, the Igbo elders were very sluggish in embracing Western education. They didn't even send their own, initially, they didn't send their own children to school. They sent their other words that they considered not to be those that will come and violate the culture. To school, so that they can use them to censor the ground, like Okumagada, or the fowl gets into a strange place and does not step with two legs initially. All right, so they were like censoring the white man's way until they realized, like Mr. Brown in Things Fall Apart told the elders, you are sluggish in welcoming Western education, but I tell you that those who are embracing Western education will be those who will rule the country in future. So when they realized that, typical of the Igbo man, they went headlong with all their strength to recover the grounds lost. And the result was that the post-independence Nigeria, all capable experts in all fields were virtually Igbo. Until the Civil War came, and after the Civil War, the military took over. There was a unitary system. The regions disappeared. Ideology disappeared from governance, and Nigeria was held together by the barrels of the gun. But even at that, because of oil boom, people did not forage so much abroad. The craze for the abroad thing started from Babangida's regime, General Ibrahim Babangida, the military president, who brought in SAP and devalued Nigeria's money. Because as of that time, as of 1989, before 1989, up to 1989, May 1989, that he brought in SAP, Naira was superior to dollar. It was 70 kobo to $1, not even 1 naira to $1, 70 kobo to $1. And so it was not profitable going abroad, because when you came back, your money shrank.
Yeah.
But as soon as SAP was introduced, I remember then I was in year 3 in the university, and I was among those on the street shouting at the top of our roof of our voices. And we rejected SAP. Babangida went through the back door to take SAP, and the reason was because of his illicit dealings in drugs and other secret dealings that the West had profiled, and they were using it to blackmail him. So to remain in power, he kept conceding and conceding. All right, it's a similar thing that is happening right now with the current president. As soon as you have any president that has skeletons in the cupboard, don't expect anything good from that president, because the West will always profile such individual and use their illicit dealings to always ask them to do what is untoward. And so he brought in SAP, which we have already rejected. He brought it in through the back door, and then to calm us down, brought in what they call the May-SAP riot and May-SAP anti-riot that was meant to dialogue with the academia. And then, as of that time, Sam Aluko, the renowned economist, was still alive. And he said then, they knew how Naira moved from 70 kobo to 5 Naira to $1. And if the federal government has the willpower, Naira can still be taken back to exactly what it was before May 1989. Now, Babangida finished, I think by the time he finished, the thing got to about 11 Naira or 15 Naira or more. That's how the Nigerian, it affected sports in Nigeria, especially football. Then players like Stephen Keshi had to foray abroad because it didn't make sense anymore to stay at home. Then the drain syndrome started on a serious note. Before then, there was no brain drain. Going abroad was to go and acquire more expertise and come back home and add up what you have. But then, as soon as Naira got devalued, it became a trend to go abroad to earn dollars, to earn pounds, to earn euro, so that you can, when you come back home and change it, it will multiply or quadruple, or even become gasolinized, or have a quadruple of gazillion interest. So, and when Abdul Salam came, he rounded the whole thing up to 100 Naira to $1. Abacha came in and made it 88 Naira to $1. By the time Obasanjo came, it got back to $100 Naira to $1 and more. I think Jonathan came in and made it at 125. And by the time Jonathan was moving to $200 Naira to $1, everybody was on the street, and the APC government campaigned on that. One of the things they profiled against Jonathan to remove him. But when the APC government came in, the whole thing was kind of, so it became, I'm saying that from Babangida, every government that came had to devalue the Naira the further so that they can patch up debts. So the Nigerians became guinea pigs and shock absorbers for the recklessness as pandeminism of the leaders. So the more the Naira got devalued, and the harder living conditions became. So it became a business to send one's children abroad. And one of the easiest way to go abroad is through education. So as soon as any child finishes first degree here, he looks for masters and goes abroad, scholarship. Now it is difficult to get scholarship for masters, so it's PhD. So they struggle to finish a master's and then begin to look for scholarships abroad. And those who cannot do that pay as much as 20 million. I have a nephew who is going abroad this next year. To do that cost her 20 million naira. That's enough to start a business here, but the conditions are harsh.
Yeah.
I know of an in-law that spent almost 30 million naira to relocate himself and his whole family to Britain, only to get there to discover that it is not greener pastures the way he thought. And he's still relying on his property back here in Nigeria to sustain himself and his family abroad. Gradually, he may, the water may found level. But that is how we got to the level we are. So that even today, if you are talking about Nigerians being the more in number all over the world, particularly the Igbo, the reason is hardship. The difference between the Igbo and others is because there is, I'm talking as an Igbo man, there is an invisible law that seemed to say the Southeast would not be developed. So Igbos started leaving the Southeast to look for greener pastures in other parts of Nigeria, and they now discovered that one of the ways of catching up and getting enough money is to go abroad. So they start going to all the four winds of the world. Some of us didn't find we are where we are because it didn't tickle our fancy. All right, but the truth of the matter is that gradually, it's not only for Igbo, but even today, here in University of Lagos, even as intellectuals, parents are either sending their children to private schools or send them abroad. Some take loan to do that because of consistent strike. A course that is supposed to be read in 3 years to be read in 5-7 years, and so on and so forth. So a lot of factors. And so those who cannot afford going abroad send their children to private school, but as soon as they finish private school, know that their eyes is towards outward. It's outward. Because I have as a lecturer here in the University of Lagos, I had to shun people that I'm no longer doing references for people to go abroad, because you could sit on your computer whole month and you have done nothing other than doing references for people. And then, as even 3 days ago, some students who just finished their education, they are going for youth service, are already applying abroad for scholarship. And I asked them, are you coming back here? They say, no, our guy is abroad. Then I have someone I supervise at MA level, and I said, what's the next level? Are you coming for PhD? Oh, that one will be abroad. The conditions in Nigeria is too harsh.
We ourselves, we're over here salivating. As a matter of fact, OKDB is going to be in Nigeria next year, early next year sometime.
Yes,
we're all trying to figure out how to put ourselves together so that we could go back to Nigeria and then try to do what we're doing here over there, and hopefully be part of the conversation to try to get us out of this slump mindset that we're in. Great summation by you, Dibia Chidozie, man. You know, this is one of these topics that really need to be talked about, and it needs to be talked about realistically, you know, not just about we're successful outside and then we're all, you know, acting all proud, and where we should be ashamed of ourselves.
Sure.
You don't have people that have this kind of conversations, but we're having it today. I've heard some references a little bit to the kind of plight that we find ourselves in with this mindset that we're successful abroad, which is nothing to brag about. And I'm going to say it unequivocally on this show. Being successful migrant group is nothing to be proud of, particularly in the African or Nigerian context. Because like we mentioned earlier, and Dibia Chidozie Okoro touched upon it, this brain drain thing is generational. Think about it this way. A lot of us that are abroad had children over here. And sometimes it doesn't matter how many times you take the children from here to Nigeria for them to visit, they are now Americans. The conditions over there is not suitable enough for them to say, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make things happen in this country. You have to have a certain, what's the word that I'm looking for? Something has to happen inside your psyche for you to say, I just can't look at this problem from the outside. If it's a problem that it needs to be solved, I have to be part of the solution. You have what we call, an epiphany. You understand what I'm saying? You have an epiphany, and you're like, you know what? We could talk about it all we want to, but if we don't get involved, we can't solve this problem. There is nothing to brag about being a successful migrant group, because that in itself is a negative based on the idea that you're not in your country.
Sure.
You have to ask the reason, why are you abroad? Am I here to get an education like you have mentioned and then go back to help to build? Like Obama's dad did, came here, got his PhD in economics, went to Kenya to help to build Kenya. Like the Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe and all these people did, got the education, went back. You understand what I'm saying? Is that the story here? You know, in Ukporo, we have a saying, almost sobuku, nobody else. You're all nice and dressed up and everything, but in the village, your mother is naked. Africa, Nigeria is our mother. We're over here abroad, all dressed up, looking nice, bragging that we are a successful cultural group. We forget that we as parents are stuck here. Then the children that we have that we should have had in Africa are born here. You are losing generations of Africans that should be helping to build Africa. You're losing them abroad. The first generation that got here, and subsequently the children, the grandchildren, blah, 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 blah. They're not going back over there. And by the time you yourself realize what's happening to you, you're in your 60s and 70s. When you do go back over there, you're not helping building anything. You're going back over there to go retire in the village and die. You're not going back over there as a 40-something or even 50-something year old. You're in your 60s, 70s, sometimes 80s. You go back home just to die. You're not contributing anything because your psyche and the way you see the world has been manipulated by your experience outside of Nigeria. And then we talk about education. Yeah, we have the PhDs, we have all that stuff, and you're an engineer, you're that. But what kind of education are you getting? Are you getting an education as a prerequisite to cultural and economic revitalization of Africa? Are you Pan-African in your thinking? Exactly what kind of education are you getting and for whose benefit? Are you getting the Western education so you could help build your host country? Are you getting the Western education so you could take it to Africa, put it to use so that you could compete in the 21st century? Nigeria couldn't even compete in the 20th century. The last time we competed in the 20th century was in 1983. After that, it was downhill from then on. That was it. The Ziks, the Operas, all those people that helped build Nigeria as a region, where each region was trying to outdo the other and contribute to the general part. In Eastern Nigeria, it was agriculture, wasn't it? It wasn't oil.
It wasn't oil. Every part was agriculture.
My dad was a manager at the Eastern Nigerian Development Corporation. My dad was a manager and a director in there back in the 60s in Enugu. Each region contributed something to the pot. It was competition, healthy. It was within. And then altogether, we become great. That doesn't exist. What we've done is with that Western way of thinking, Western education, Western democracy, Western economics, Western this and Western that, Nigeria now have damn near 40 states in it. With damn near 40 different governors. Before we had 3 people running each region. After the war, we had 12, right? 12 states?
Sure.
Then after that, Igbos only had East Central. Now we got 5 states. Who knows what's coming? Maybe 6 or 7. I don't know. We were worrying about Obabi Asika as the one who was maybe putting a couple of dollars in his pocket, but at least he had he was thinking along the frame of accountability, but at the same time, satisfying his own economic agenda, whatever it was. But at the time that Asika was in Eastern Nigeria, Aba was flourishing, wasn't it?
Of course.
Onitsha, Enugu, the capital city. We were living in Ekulu, GRA. We were the top-notch real estate in the whole city of Enugu. That's where we lived, Imoke Street. We came up with the big guys, if you know what I'm saying, where the big boys were hanging out. That stuff doesn't exist anymore. If you go to Ekulu now, you won't even recognize it. What kind of education are we getting, African or European? I was speaking to a gentleman the other day, and I was telling him plain and simple, don't talk to me about being black. When your God looks like you, then come to me talk about being black. If your God doesn't look like you, there's nothing black about you but your hue. Your blackness begins here and it ends here. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing primordial about you. Other cultures see God in their own image. You don't. I told him about the HBCUs, the Black University. I said, there's nothing African going on in there. They validate themselves using standards that are set for them by Western education, and they have to confine and follow that. If they don't follow it, they will be disregarded as a viable institution. I said, there's nothing going on Sunday when you go to church. They're not in there in church on Sunday talking about your ancestors. The only ancestors they're talking about belong to the Jews, to the Europeans. Nobody's going in there and talking about your African ancestors. You act like you're black because your hue is black, but there's nothing black about you. Because you're over here telling me about Jewish heroes, Moses and Abraham, and I've not heard you talk about anything African about you. What kind of education are you getting? That is another detriment when you talk about where the most successful groups outside of Nigeria. Are you getting a Pan-African education that tells you that you have a community or you have communal responsibility to go back and develop your community with your education? I'm not talking about African Americans and Jamaicans and all of that. I'm talking about us immigrants that came voluntarily to the United States or to Europe, to whatever, not those that came in voluntarily. Those that came in voluntarily, whose culture was taken away from them and they were resocialized into this cult called the West. That's a different thing altogether. We could deal with that. That's a totally different topic that we could speak to. But I'm just talking about us as Africans, Nigerians, Igbo people in particular. What kind of education are you getting? African or European? Because if your education is helping to build their communities, then all you're achieving is personal success, not communal. And even at that, there's nothing successful about it, because when you now look at the generations that you leave behind, that generation belongs to them. They don't belong to Africa. They're not going back to Africa to change anything. What we end up with in our Western education is to validate our worth by standards that are not of our own choosing. There's nothing about Western education that looks like you. As a matter of fact, a lot of the inventions in the West, especially here in the United States, was by Africans. Africans that were enslaved over here, like Benjamin Banneker, George Washington Carver. Then you can talk about Africans that came, went abroad, did their thing, like Dr. Philip Emeagwali, the Igbo mathematician and computer scientist. You can talk about Patricia Bath with the laser eye surgery. You can talk about Dr. Vivian Thomas with the open heart surgery. You can talk about the people that invented the elevator, the cell phone. You can talk about a whole lot of things, automobiles back in 1908, 1910, by Black inventors, engineers. We could go on and talk about the contributions that people of African ancestry have made to civilized behavior. But when you go to these universities, do they talk about these African heroes and inventors and leaders? No. Instead, they tell you about Vasco da Gama. They tell you about Ferdinand Magellan. They talk about Christopher Columbus. Nobody's talking about the people I'm talking about. They don't talk about that in Nigeria, not in Africa, not in any African university. Are they going to sit down and start telling you about greatest African inventors? You're not going to get that. You know nothing about your ancestors who came before you. So what is this thing about being a successful immigrant group? Based on what? What's the criteria? Your economic standing in the foreign country? Is that it? When the foreigner now looks at you, that you are not a burden to their social network or to their social safety net, like getting in America, you know, where you get Social Security and all that kind of stuff. You're paying money into their port, but you're still a Black person to them. Jamaican, Nigerian, African American, Haitian, British Black, Chinese Black, Martian Black. Doesn't matter what Black you are. Those people that hate you in this world from other races, human races or communities, when they see me, they're not asking me if I'm Igbo, if I'm Yoruba, if I'm Hausa, if I'm African American. All they see is an African, a Black person. And that hate is uniform, regardless of where your Black behind is. That hate is uniform. Nobody cares if you're Yoruba Black. All they see is Black. But somehow we don't see that. Even some of us in our African communities think we're more superior, or that we're superior to our fellow Africans based on where our geography is. The Jamaican thinks he's superior to the Haitian, and yet they are all called the N-word. Nobody cares. We are still an N to them. Nobody's asking you that. We validate ourselves by standards that are not of our own choosing, by bragging about the fact that we're a successful immigrant group outside our communities, but within our communities, we're nothing. We're not doing anything. And this is a post-colonial mentality. It's post-colonial and became acute after 1983, particularly in Nigeria, just like you were stressing, here. It's a detriment. It's nothing to be proud of. It's nothing to brag about. But we look at it as, oh my God, we in Nigeria were successful outside, and then we beat our chest like an ape, like Tarzan, and think that we're saying something great. No, we're not. We're lost sheep outside of our own communities, running around in the desert, waiting for rain, thinking that the European or the oppressor is going to respect you because you're a successful immigrant group outside of your own country. They're happy that you're an immigrant group successful outside your own country because they know that you're not going back to your community to help develop your community. So you're stuck in other lands. And the braggadocio that you have for being a successful community outside of Africa, to whose benefit? Yours or your host country or community. Education, real education, has 5 steps to overcoming what we call Black failure. And that's what this topic just tells me, the level of failure in our African community. What it has done, number one, is remove any level of cultural consistency amongst people of African ancestry. We don't have that. Go to the Chinese, they have cultural consistency. Go to the Arabs. Even if ISIS is killing their own fellow Muslims, they all read the Quran. They just interpret it differently. We have no cultural consistency among African groups all over the world. So that education you're getting removes that. Doesn't teach you your history. Doesn't teach you your spirituality. Does not teach you your language. Your African language, especially in Nigeria or Igbo people, is not a prerequisite to anything. It should be. But it's not. There's a lot of Igbo people that can't read Igbo. Give them Igbo book. They can't. They can't write in it. They can't do it. He will pick up a book in English and read it and just bam, bam. Give him the Abibidi. The ancient script is gone anyway. Nobody's thinking about that. But let's take this invented Igbo and give them that we write in Igbo and we talk about it and we think it's authentic. It's not authentic about writing Igbo because the symbols you use are still European. It's still A, B, C, D. So no matter how you want to package it and you want to make it and say that, oh, he can read Igbo, in Igbo, you are still using the English alphabet or Arabic alphabet, which is the real genealogy of the stuff. You're still using it. It don't belong to you. The Chinese people, they write. They're not writing A, B, C, D, are they? What kind of education are you getting? Number two, by removing you from your environment and being happy outside and being successful, you have simply eradicated environmental love, self-love. You see no value in yourself. Family love. You don't have that. Community love. What the hell do you care? I'm successful abroad. I'm a lawyer. I live in a big house. I drive a Rolls Royce. That becomes your Achilles heel. You're testing for things that you cannot use in your own environment because for the truth be told, if you bring your Rolls Royce back to Igbo land there, you might not wake up in the morning tomorrow. Somebody may poison you or kill you to take what you got. You eradicate that. Educational excellence. When your education is focused on your primordial core, you have vision. We don't have any vision back there. The kind of visions we have is the vision to get the heck out of Africa, go abroad so I can be successful and send money back home. Now, the money you send back home, exactly what does it do back home? You built a house for yourself in the village. You help them to go to school. What education do they attain when they get over there? In the end, they all want to run the heck out of there because the leadership back home does not create an environment for success. So you don't have educational excellence. The educational excellence you have is the one that is cultivated outside of your community based on somebody else's type of education. Nothing Pan-African. Like Akachineke said, home is where the heart is, period. It's about home. Being successful abroad and bragging about it is a fool's errand, is stupid, and must be addressed. Being successful outside of Nigeria, how does that promote community empowerment? How does that empower me in Umboro, in my village? By being abroad. Don't even know what's going on over there. It's second and third hand information. When you do go home, you spend, what, 2-3 weeks? The most you spend is a month, and you're right back over here to handle your business here, so your business here doesn't fall, because what you do here is what's affording you what you got over there. So your commitment to home is lessened. There's no community empowerment, no community service. It's stressed. Crime prevention, political power and influence, you don't have that because you're not over there. And last but not least, being successful abroad does not leave room for economic development in your country where you come from. There's no community-based employment. There's no businesses being created. And even if the business is being created, the competition is so... Listen, man. Let's just take one, how do you say, one profession. You know what a vulcanizer is? People that fix tires. When you come to a street and there are 20 businesses on that street and 16 of them are vulcanizers, you got a problem. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
You have a problem. 16 of them should not be vulcanizers, because if 16 of them are vulcanizers, it means that they ain't making no money.
That's true.
They should be diversified. You should have maybe 2 or 3 vulcanizers who will make enough money to clear the employment when everybody is a vulcanizer. Like my dad says, you're dancing all over the place. You hear a song that has a rhythm, but you ain't following it. Everybody's just shaking their head and just looking like dummies. These are some of the detriments to this idea that we are a successful group outside of Nigeria and it should be something that we should be proud of. No, it is nothing to be celebrated. It's painful. It's shameful. It denies us the ability to go back home and fix home and create businesses back in Africa, back in Nigeria. Brain drain, all the expertise that we have, accumulated with our Western education and living abroad and all that, we're using it to develop the host country, while that expertise never goes to Nigeria. And we never end up practicing what we call cross-cultural pollination. Take a little bit from the other community to add to your own and help build it. But for you to do that, there has to be a frame of mind. You have to have a certain frame of mind. You have to have a Pan-African way of thinking to understand that the community comes first before the individual. Chidozie, take it away.
Yeah, you just said it all. Because if you look at it, after the Civil War, Nigeria lost out any track of development that it embarked on, because development is first primarily human before you talk about physical growth. Development is human, that growth in terms of GDP and physical is physical, because you're talking about skyscrapers and all of that. But even at that, you discover something. Because we were dislodged from our culture by slavery and colonization that ate over 200 to 300 years of our life, So there is a first and foremost cultural displacement, cultural dislodgement, and which has created cultural derailment. So we have kept derailing. So this brain drain issue has gone beyond derailing. It's like uprooting, cultural uprooting.
Yeah.
It's been uprooted from your culture, and then it now creates a problem of the individual who, like the lizard, had jumped from the high Iroko tree to the ground and just had to acknowledge himself. Oh, I've tried. If nobody praises me, I praise myself. So let me nod and beat my chest. The African American is suffering that, and Africans who voluntarily went to the abroad are suffering from that. And then to begin to look for recognition, we begin to brag. But like you said, that's what has happened is that fish has been taken out of water, especially its own kind of water. Maybe the fish that lives in fresh water is now taken to swamp, and the one that is lives in swamp has been taken to dry land. And I wonder which fish can survive in dry land. Maybe the fish will find a way of surviving, but you discover that you have been dislodged from your own cultural terrain. Now, if you compare, which is why the brain drain issue has not improved our lot in Nigeria. It has not even helped the issue of decolonization. It has not helped the issue of decolonization. And it cannot help the issue of decolonization because there is nothing happening culturally. There is no bridge being built. No bridge is being built culturally. No. So because no bridge is being built culturally, then you discover that we cannot grow. And there is no program to that. No program to that. All right, to that effect. So whatever little program that existed was before the military came in. Now, and the Pan-African spirit that the likes of Zeke of Africa, and Nkrumah, Nyerere, Mandela, the kind of Pan-African spirit they had disappeared. Yeah. But even that Pan-African spirit had its own disadvantage in the sense that what you have in post-colonial Africa is what you call the new state. And what is the new state? The state which were balkanized and created by the colonial masters. And the whole essence behind the creation of this state is to destroy the essence, the foundation that constitutes the essence of the source of the essence of the African. What is that foundation? Ethnicity. Ethnicity, we like it or not, is a foundation of culture.
It is.
And then, as we are headed together, the Pan-Africanism meant trying to build a new Africa. In trying to build a new Africa, it meant, like Samaro Machel of Mozambique said, for the new Africa to evolve, the old Africa must die. The likes of Nkrumah wanted to build a new Africa through the process of categorical conversion. But the problem there is that my research into African spirituality, it does not convert. Rather, it wants to understand things in their natural state.
Absolutely.
And understand them in that natural state and harmonize the life forces so that at the end of the day, all entities remain in their natural state. None extinguishes the other. So the problem now is that the new Africa wanted to create, the nationalists wanted to create a new Africa still structured on Eurocentric ideology and ideologues. All of them were guilty of that. Zeke of Africa, Nkrumah, Awolowo, the closest of them all is Nyerere. Yeah. However, because they were all in a hurry, trying to be intellectuals and at the same time politicians. So they were unprofessional, they were amateurists. Because the ideal thing is for them to face politics and leave theorizing to the academia, and then you will have professionalism. So Nyerere missed out the very thing that allowed communalistic democracy, which is African spirituality. All of them missed it out, even though Nkrumah was a traditionalist, and others like Zik, they all knew the importance of it, but because they did not grow in it, that's the point you are making. They didn't grow inside it. And so they did not understand the spirituality. And that is because of the nature of a method of education that was enshrined in Dibia. And so you have to be an initiate of that group called Dibia, the intellectual group in tradition, the Babalawo, for you to understand the ideology, cultural ideology, the substance of the ideology of culture, which is the ideology binding individuality and community together in traditional Africa. They mix that out. That is unlike when you go to Asia, you find that virtually all the Asian leaders grew up in their ancient traditional culture. Are you talking about Mahatma Gandhi? As soon as Gandhi, he was educated in South Africa, but as soon as he got back to India, he left his suit. In South Africa, I watched the film, he was wearing suit, clean suit. But as soon as he got back to India, he threw away the suit. He did what Moses of the Bible did. Moses of the Bible, when he was a crossroad, and then he asked himself, he was going to be a prince. Is he a prince of Egypt, since he was brought up in all the ways and wisdom of Egypt? Or a prince of his people who are oppressed, who have been made slaves? Then he said, okay, if I'm a prince, I have to be a prince for my people. But if I'm a prince, I have to find my principality. And my principality is not Egypt, my principality is Israel. And so he had to lead his people from, out of Egypt through mass exodus. And so Gandhi did the same thing. He did the same thing when he got to India. He had to redefine himself within not even Buddhism. That is a later development from Hindu. He redefined himself within the most ancient culture of India, Hinduism. And he began to dress like, and he led by example. Are you talking about Mao? The same thing. Are you talking about Kim Il-sung of Korea, that later became North Korea? The same thing. Are you talking about the Japanese and the Meiji Ishin? The same thing. And so because the leadership grew within the culture, they knew the spirituality of the culture. They knew the structure of the culture. So they knew how to bring in modernization, because decolonization is simply modernization. And so our modernization is that you live within the confine of your culture. You understand every iota of idea, concept, theories within the purview of your culture. So when you are going out to go and bring more knowledge that is not in your culture, to fill the gaps in your culture.
Cross-cultural pollination, perfectly said.
So that is not happening in Africa. What happened is that we were trying to rebuild a new Africa based on the colonial structure of the new state, and that was bound to collapse. And so you look at it, Nigeria is a worst case because of the leadership that has gotten worse. But if you look at other African countries, they are not different from us. They are not different from us, and that's because we are living within the colonial structure, which is why I advocate that if we want to solve this problem of brain drain, we have to reconstitute the existing new states of Africa into what I call united federations or confederation, so that each person goes back to his culture. And we go back to your culture, you have to use your language. You have to embark on translation of all walks of life to your culture. And we have to stop this transliteration issue and do translation. The Igbo will have to go back, the Igbo, the Jagam, the Ekori, the Efik, the Ibibio have to go back to Nsibidi. And develop it. And so the new civilization will start. If we don't do that, then we cannot attain the state that Asians have attained. Because what has happened is that every Asian scholar you see abroad is not self-sponsored. Even the one that sponsors the sponsors within the agenda of the country. They have a national agenda. And if you look at the Asians, rather than go to Harvard, Oxford, Paris, Germany to go and learn social sciences or humanities, they go there to teach their own culture.
Yeah.
What you see Asians go outside to study are those courses they're deficient in. Because there's a story of a Nigerian and a Chinese. I see an African, a Kenya and a Chinese who met in London. And the Chinese asked, "What are you here to study?" He said, "History." And the African was so proud. And then the Chinese said, "Why should you come to another place?" He said, "So whose history are you studying?"
Yeah.
That he is there to study what his country is deficient in, so that he could go back. So if you look at it, the Asian tigers are tigers because each one of them hashed a national plan of how to catch up and take over from the West. It's a plan, all of them. And that plan is that and that Asian scholar, especially when they got their independence, Japan in 1861 or so, China in 1948, India in 1954, and so on and so forth. Each one has a national plan. And the national plan is that first and foremost, the scholar is a mature scholar like you and I, whose mind are already made, and then we are sponsored abroad. They give us money, we shave our beards, we look young all the time, we go to library. When the US or Western this say it is time to go to holiday, we carry placard, we are a poor African students, you must give us scholarship. Meanwhile, they are busy spying. So you see that every product brought out by the West, you see Asians using their tinkophone, not, this one is even better, using their tinkophone to sniff everything about it, sniff it, snap it. Oh, good. You know how they do, good. Yeah. They snap everything. They snap it. The picture will appear in all parts of Asia. If it's China, India, it will appear. Give them before the end of the year. They manufacture a cheaper product and efficient and break the Western monopoly and spoil their market. But what does the African do? What we do is to buy that product. We buy that product, and when we buy that product, we beat our chest that we are the first to buy that kind of product. And another one will now say, I was the first that not only bought it, but took it down home, so I was the first to take it to my village. To summarize my distance for now, that is how we started our development. When I was just thinking about the topic as I was driving to the office, I said, have we really had development? I don't think we had. No. We have. Because a particular man was talking about Zika war and so on and so forth. And I said, well, the Zika, they tried in terms of growth, but they did not address the main thing about development, which is first and foremost culture, ethnicity, and how do both of them become the foundation of education.
Yeah.
If they did, it was peripheral, because they didn't grow in the spirituality. All right? So it was peripheral, unlike Asians that did it. And so to summarize, my example is this. In 1989, I was in year 3. And then myself and a colleague of mine, then, Sam Chus Adeze, we were talking about development. And he said Nigeria was more developed than India as of 1989. And I maintained that India was more developed than Nigeria. Then I asked what was his own indices for development. He said, well, India as of 1989 was not using color television. But Nigeria started using color television in 1974. And that Nigeria started using television before India. That Awolowo introduced the first television in 1960s. Television station, first skyscraper, 10-story building in Ibadan. I've been to Ibadan, I've seen the Cocoa House. It's an old hag now, no maintenance, because it was not built by the people, it was bought. So what our nationalists and the Kenji Dam we built, everything we built, what we did was that we had money. We bought physical development. That is why our mind cannot maintain those things and improve on them. So we bought. Now, India, and I asked him, I said, why is it as of 1989, India was not using color television? He said, India said it would not use color television until it can produce equipment
themselves
that can transmit in color. And then they will not use that technology to produce color television. I told him, I said, those are the people developing, because they are deliberately moving at their own pace. They are not borrowing. They are not trying to do like else we go. One hand to, you are not up to something. You want to measure height. That's what we are doing. We are always measuring height, wanting to be like, mimicking. That's why we are in the business of mimicry. Wanting to be like, and you're trying to be like, you forget your foundation. And you always try, so you continue to live a fake life. Well, and I told him, I said, look, I told him, I said, some chooks. He said, yes. I said, what year are we in? He said, 1989. I said, I give you 10 years at most and 5 years at least. India will come up without that technology. They will make color television, and us Nigerians will go to India and import. He said it will never happen. I said, okay, let's work. The 10 years is not too bad. So by 1994, India, which is 5 years from 1989, India came up with the technology of test coat. Very efficient coloring technology. Bright and cheap. Far cheaper than what the West will give. By 1996, test coat was in India. I called my friend Sanchux and I asked him in Igbo, what is the He was only like, he kept laughing and laughing. He said, you. He said, me, you. How come you see all this? I said, it's simple. We are deceiving ourselves. We are not developing. So India is living within the confine of its culture, the heart of its culture. Like Father Pantelon Irubu will say, the pen of his culture, the essence of his culture, its spirituality. From independence in 1954 to date, India has established over 30 to 50 academies and institutes studying India's spirituality from all walks of life, science, arts, social science, managerial sciences, and they are doing cultural bridging. We are not doing that. So we are just playing like fools, like the lizard that jumped on the Iroko tree and has to do self-praise. That's what we are busy doing. We don't have national agenda, no group agenda. Everything is about individual agenda. And when you bring that individual agenda to help the country spoils it. It destroys it. So let me stop for now.
I mean, Ibo, man, very well made points. I can't agree with you anymore. There's nothing to reiterate or even bring up. You are so succinct about your points on what you talked about, that I'm just going to continue the conversation, without even addressing anything you had said, because you said it all. You said a mouthful. If I put much into what you said now, if I address what you said, I will be ruining it. So the way you said it, I need to leave it just that way so that the impression that you made upon our audience remains intact. I say in Igbo land, ebe aka ruru onye mkpumkpu yoko ekpa.
Oh yeah.
You're only gonna hang your bags where you can reach it.
Sure.
But our people, we hang our bags where we can't get to it.
Yeah.
Instead of hanging it, we throw it up there, and then when it's time, it's easy to throw it up there. But then when it's time for you to retrieve it, you can't get to it. This is what we do. We throw away the baby with the bath water. We think that to be civilized is to jettison our culture and adopt somebody else's culture to fulfill ourselves and make ourselves feel important, make ourselves feel civilized. But we don't understand the definition of civilization and what it means. In layman's terms, it's simply the ability to see your fellow human being as equal and having the right to their existence, and that you are willing to give your life in defense of the right of your fellow human being to exist. That's civilized behavior. It's not technological know-how. That's not what it is. It's not having nuclear weapons. That's not civilization. Ancient civilizations didn't have nuclear bombs or whatever, but we refer to them as civilizations. It was more about your human interaction than anything else. That's what's being civilized. When somebody says, act civilized, are they telling you to go get a gun and shoot somebody? Act civilized is to comport yourself to a certain expectation of behavior in relation to your fellow human being. And that's what African spiritual culture is anchored on. Madubuchi Bear, from me to Chineke, there is no distance. We don't get that level of understanding about our spirituality and culture with this Western education that we get, with this idea that we're the most successful immigrant group, and we wear it as a badge of honor. For who? Who is benefiting? You may have good cars and big houses and, Mercedes Benzes or whatever it is that you have abroad, where they still look at you as less of a human being. But when you come back to your village, you have nothing. People are wandering around in the desert waiting for it to rain. Do we really want to be progressive? Do we really want to progress? Do we really want to develop? Do we have the courage to do what is necessary to develop? Dubai 25, 30 years ago was just a desert. Dubai is one of the most beautiful and just most developed cities in the world, if not number one. And guess what? They're Muslim. They didn't have to give up Islam to achieve that. Japan is Shinto. They make Toyotas. They make Hondas. They make robots. Number one when it comes to robotics. They are Shinto. They don't go to church on Sunday. Indians are Hindu. Primordial religious core. It is that religious core that gave them the awareness that they must compete with the rest of the world on their own terms. And as much as they have 1.23 billion people in India, create an environment where people come over here and exercise what they call soft power. The computing industry in America is run by Indians. The billionaire Indians here, they own billion-dollar companies in Silicon Valley in California. Where do you think they got that education in computer science that they got to come here in America and control it? They got it in India. They're all, 99.9% of them, they're all Hindus. They know what they're doing. The Arab world is Islam. It's Islamic. You go to China, it's Taoism, Confucianism, or Buddhism that is actually Indian in nature by Siddhartha. But the emperor at that time loved it and established it as a national religion in India. In China. But China has three main religions over there. They don't go to the mosque. Those religions, in their way, represent them. Every major, vibrant economy or culture in this world have one thing in common. They're all culturally original. The European is Christian. And they will defend Christianity before they start talking about Islam, even though Muslims live there. Even though Hindus live there. Even though Buddhists, Sikhs, the Taoists, they all live in Britain, in Europe. But Europe would defend Christianism first before anything else. Christianity is paramount. In Saudi Arabia, Islam is paramount. All other religions are almost non-existent, looked upon as the enemy. You go to Japan, it's Shinto. The shogun back in the 16th century beheaded all these evangelists and destroyed all the churches in Japan as a message to its citizens to not marginalize their religious culture or their spiritual culture. Ahaike Okonyo has said, a people that cannot be identified by a religious culture do not exist. Think about that. A people that cannot be identified by a spiritual culture don't exist. All these nations and continents have their primordial religion. Africa, what about you? What do you have? You're bragging about how successful you are outside of your own home. What are you identified with when it comes to spiritual, your primordial core? What are you called? Of course, religion is an individual thing where I come from. But the philosophies are called something different, but at its core, it's pretty much the same thing. We could promote one of those like we're doing with Chaism right now. We're not doing it and saying that the Yoruba should stop seeing Orumilarism, to stop recognizing Shango and Orumila and follow Chineke. We understand they have a right to worship God the way they understand best without bitterness. But this is the 21st century, and we understand that as a people of African ancestry, just like you come together as states to create a country, spiritually speaking, we have to find a common ground and present our African spiritual culture in unison. Because the greatest instrument you have in times of oppression is your spiritual culture. If you lose that, you've lost your mind. And if you lose your mind, you will end up bragging that you are very successful outside of your own community. It's just an indication and evidence of a lost people. We're totally lost. There's nothing to brag about that. You don't see the Europeans bragging about how successful they are outside of Europe. Indians don't brag about that. Muslims ain't bragging about that. Nobody brags about how successful they are outside their own community except for Black folks. Africans, where success is individualized. And those people that are paying your salaries in all this country are just happy to have you. While they're prejudiced against you and racist against you, they are glad to siphon all the services that you provide to help build their own country. I will never take responsibility for the condition of your mind and how they put you in a position where you see no value in yourself and you don't have the ability to go back to where you come from to help develop it. Or have the courage to talk about your spiritual culture and things that we need to do as Africans to be able to embrace our primordial core. I have a little pride in being Black. Have a little pride in the color of your God. There's nothing that has been taught to the African spiritually that didn't exist in Africa. Thou shalt not kill is not a Christian thing. It's not an Abrahamic religious thing. Everybody knows that, regardless of what culture you come from, that is wrong for you to lie. We ain't walking around lying until Moses got thou shalt not lie, 10 commandments on the tablet. Then all of a sudden, we now realize that we shouldn't lie. Thou shalt not covet someone else's wife. You didn't need Moses to tell you that, did you? Tell me what it is about this foreign spiritual culture that is not ingrained in yours. And even better, go ahead and tell me. There's nothing in anybody else's spiritual culture. Let me tell you something about spiritual culture. The only difference about spiritual culture is the story of the beginning of a human being, the beginning of man or woman. How did this thing called life start? Some people will attribute it to this deity, they'll attribute it to that deity, but at the end of it, there's a central figure. These deities just don't run around. Some deities have parents. Yeah, it's true. They have brothers and sisters who are also deities or gods. There's always one thing central to all religions that believe in a creator. Some religions don't believe in a creator. They just believe in this evolution thing or whatever it is. You know, hey, whatever terms you want. But for any religion that believes in a central force, there's commonality. The only difference in how we see it is based on ethnicity, it's based on geography. Geography is responsible for cultural way of life. The culture that you develop comes from where you're located. It is your fight for survival that precipitates the culture that you adhere to in all areas of human endeavor. Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill. All that stuff is to promote relationship between you and your fellow human being, to respect your fellow human being as a valuable creation of the Almighty. That you as an individual don't have any more right to exist than your neighbor. That's why you have the spiritual commandments. That's why they exist, to put you on par, on the same level as your neighbor, so that you can coexist. Because if you don't have a way of controlling human behavior, it will be anarchy and chaos. We'll be dancing all over each other. Only the strong will survive. And in reality, only the strong will survive. If you're not strong at birth, you will die. If you're not strong when you get out here, you will die. You will disappear. When the going gets tough and you're not strong enough to make it through, you will die and you will disappear. And as a community, if you're not strong enough, you will be taken advantage of and you will disappear and you will be colonized one way or another through forced coercion. That's what we found ourselves. Successful immigrant groups outside of Nigeria are simply a product of slavery and colonization. That's it. Because if it wasn't slavery and colonization, we won't be sitting here talking about how successful we are outside our own borders. We have to look at things in the right context. We have to ask the right questions. We just can't sit around here wearing that as a badge of honor, when in reality, it's a tragedy. I was reading and watching a video about what happened in Lagos, where the Lagos state government, whoever the governor is, I don't know, they got bulldozers and they're destroying, houses that were built by Igbos and people in the East. And they're over there crying. We leave Igbo land, not just in America, in Nigeria, in South Africa. We go there, we establish businesses, we build all kinds of stuff, and oh Lord have mercy, Igbo people, here we come again. We are dominating everywhere we go and we are bragging. But in the village, your mother is naked. All those investments that you put out there, why can't you put those investments back home? Why can't you hold the government over there accountable? We have a governor right now in Abia State who is working magic. Abia State is probably the most improved state. Within a year of his governorship, roads, Aba is becoming industrious again. You now have infrastructure where you're able to move goods from one place to another without your truck getting stuck. But if you look around in Africa, there's no development going on because everybody is abroad. We have an environment back home that does not provide the right infrastructure, the right kind of leadership on any level. The educational system back home sucks, but you over here get your PhD abroad. What is there to brag about? You have kids in the northern part of Nigeria all over the streets. They don't go to school. And yet the senators and the governors, they're giving themselves raises in billions of naira. The little kid is outside. Either he's trying to sell a trinket to a passing motorist or he's over there begging for money. While the kid should be in school. Every success that you see that we've attained or achieved outside, flip it on its head. Like good, bad. Just flip it. That success outside, flip it around, that's what we look like back home. Nothing. Education, zero. Some people have college degrees in Nigeria. If you ask them to write their name, they can't even spell it for you. Don't even know how many states in the country. Can't tell who the governor in their state is. You just flip it. Education, zero. Infrastructure, zero. But we got engineers building roads abroad, but can't even build a toothpick back home. The judiciary does not exist. There's no accountability. And when there's no accountability in business or in politics or in any human endeavor, you're done. As a society in Africa, in Nigeria in particular, we don't exist on any level. Those that have money in their pocket rule. You could kill somebody, pay the judge will arrest the corpse of the person you killed. The person you killed will be handcuffed and thrown in jail while he's dead, if you got money. This is Nigeria. This is Africa. Particularly Nigeria. Particularly Nigeria. And I'm being very specific. You could kill somebody, bribe the police and the judge, they will arrest the dead corpse and put chains on that corpse and put the corpse in jail. That's Nigeria. But we're bragging about how successful we are outside. Electricity, none, zero. Wake up in the dark, go to bed in the dark. Generators running everywhere. Families dying at home from carbon monoxide poisoning because they didn't have the wherewithal or understanding of the dangers of running generator in the house. They go to bed, wake up, in the morning, the whole family is dead. A product of the inefficient governing in Africa. Roads falling into the ditch, getting trapped, going to your village, lines and miles of cars stuck on the road. And then here comes the governor with the sirens and his bodyguards with the sirens going, woo, 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 woo. But the governor is coming. Even the governor can't get through. So when the governor goes to his village, he goes to his village as long as it ain't Christmas, when there are not too many cars on the road. Electricity, water. When you go and build a borehole, people run around here and go, oh, they brought a borehole. There's a borehole in my house right now. Go to the bathroom and turn on the tap water. I used to do that when I was a kid in Nigeria. I can't do that now. If I go to the house and turn on the tap, it is because I have on the roof, I have a couple of drums that suck water from a borehole and then purify, then I can get it. And then after a while, the ground opens up and the house sinks in because you have dug so many bloody boreholes around the whole place. Erosion has become a problem. Doing everything backwards. Basic education, electricity, road infrastructure, water, non-existent. There's nothing to be proud of because you got a borehole. If you're going to have a borehole, have it in the damn village where people live in huts in a lot of places. Then you can build your palatial, houses and put up your own water system and all that stuff. But in the city, I have to tell my housemaid or houseboy to walk a mile from the house to go fetch a bucket of water and come back with the water on their head to pour it into a drum and then go back out. I do that 7, 8, 9 times before the day is over with to fill this drum of water so I can have water. What kind of existence is that? And you're bragging about being successful outside. Innocent motors in Nigeria should be a sense of pride for us. We should be buying innocent motors, not Honda. I'm not saying you can't buy a Honda, but innocent motors should be priority. The car that is manufactured, great cars, good quality in Nigeria should be your priority if you have a sense of belonging, some Pan-African mindset. If you value yourself, if you are proud as a Nigerian that you can build cars like other countries can do, it should be your mindset that before you buy a Mercedes-Benz, see if you have a comparable car in Innocent Motors. Buy Innocent. Because the more of their cars you buy, the more economic opportunity you create. Those engineers that went abroad can come back now and build cars for Innocent Motors or even start another car company. The people, the way we think, you should have a sense of pride as an African, as being black, as, you know, people that are capable of original thought. You should have a level of pride and self-love for you to support businesses owned by our own people as opposed to buying products manufactured by others just so, like Dibia Chidozie said, so you could go and brag. I'm the first guy to do this. I'm the first guy to do that. I bought a Gucci. When somebody in Abaka make a bag just as good as Gucci, maybe even better quality, but you've been convinced that Gucci is better than you. So when we buy things foreign because we feel that things that are foreign is better than us. We have no sense, no self-love. There's nothing about us that we love or we appreciate. What we've been doing is building a castle on sand and expecting it to stand, as opposed to building a castle on a rock. A tree without deep roots will soon fall. Our problem in Africa is there's nothing that we're doing that is rooted in our way of life, in our spirituality, in our culture. Not one thing, not the educational system, not the economic system, not our political system. There's nothing about African governing that looks like Africa, that has any semblance of your history. We always look at the world from the position of want. We look at the world from a position of, can you let us do this, please? We look at the world by asking for permission to live. Beggars. Accepting scraps like a dog under the table. Talking about how proud you are that you are the most successful migrant group outside of Africa, not knowing that that is just a pitiful statement of your inability to love yourself, to have pride in yourself, to contribute to the development of your own community. There's nothing to flaunt. There's nothing to be proud of. The clothes you wear is European. Everything we do is European. We don't do anything and look at it from our own perspective. The computer, internet was a Nigerian guy. How many Africans know that? Dr. Philip Emeagwali. How many of us know that a lot of the scientific, Western, quote unquote, scientific discoveries that makes life, everyday life, worth living and easy were created by African people? In what school are they teaching that? It's not at University of Calabar. It's not University of Nsukka or Unilag, unless you have Dr. Chidozie Okoro to tell you. Unless you have people like him as your teachers, as your lecturers, for you to understand that we've always been great. Most human discoveries came out of Africa, including mathematics. The Lebombo bones 35,000 years ago. First mathematical calculation for distance. It's called the Lebombo bones. Go research it. You know, sometimes you get to a point in your life where you have this innate, maybe it's because of your upbringing, but you have this innate hunger to learn things, to see yourself differently, to not believe the narrative and the hype, to go in and get the answers for yourself. If you have that kind of mindset, you will be surprised how the world will open up to you and your thinking will change. You will begin to see yourself differently. I don't believe, and I'm sure Chidozie believes that. As an individual, I don't believe that there's anybody prouder than being African than I am. I don't believe that.
Sure.
And I believe that Dibia Chidozie believes that in his mind, there's nobody prouder of being an African than him. We should all be like that. Because if we are that way, we begin to understand that we all have a responsibility to bring ourselves out of this abyss of hopelessness that Africa finds itself, to bring ourselves out of this thinking that being successful outside of our own communities should be a badge of honor. It should be something that we should brag about, because it is not. I'm not bragging about it. I know that Dibia in her mind knows that, feels that she's the greatest. She's more African than anybody. Any true son or daughter of Africa feels that way. And it's easy to deal with them. It's easy to communicate with them. It's easy to learn from them, because people in a mindset, we don't have a bone of racism in us. We understand how the world works. We love life. We understand our place in the world. The only tragedy and things that make us stay up at night without sleep is the level of ignorance that is out there that we have to try to conquer and make our mark in this world before we die. So we try with programs like Global Faith Ministries of Cheism Live, Cheis Mahadum University, African Centered, the Coming of the Nkomi, the African Calendar, all those things that will contribute to the upliftment of people of African ancestry, and begin this dialogue of introspection to reach out inside and pull out our greatness. It's there. It is. We just have to have the courage for this introspection and not feel that every time, like a baby, that we're corrected when we're deviating from the path of rectitude, that it's a personal affront or insult on your being, because it's not. We're just sharing love and hoping that we will make a difference in our lives, in your life, and in the lives of our grandchildren. I'll leave the closing up to you, okay, Dibia.
You said a lot, and all I can do is just summarize some of these things. Like you mentioned, Governor Oti there in Abia. That's a state that in 24 years has witnessed the worst kind of backward development. So that's to show that it takes just one individual and to select like minds around him or her to move a people forward. Yeah. Because our misfortune started with Ojus Okalu. And then if you look at his background, you look at which is what has been the problem of Nigeria: cultists ruling us, grabbing power, 419ers, drug barons, grabbing power, and getting like minds around them, and then cutting down anybody that they see is a competitor. That's how Ojus Okalu is the one who started kidnapping in Abia State, and if you saw anyone who was rich enough to sponsor a candidate against him, they kidnap that individual, and then they have to demand huge ransom to discourage the individual from running for that office. And that's how the big spenders, businessmen that made Aba great, made Abia State a great, held Abrera. They started migrating to Lagos. That's the saga of it. Theology came in, continued, and we thought that Ikpeazu would be different since he has a PhD, but he was worse in the sense that Ojus Okalu even did something, but Theology did nothing. Ikpeazu was worse. All that he was worse. He couldn't do anything. He was a dancing governor. That's the governor that said a woman that just delivered at the maternity, 500 naira is a big money to be given to them. That is to say, impoverishing the people is a way of controlling them, and then empowering his family and trying to make even his own son to look like a lord before the people. So all of that is, like you said, is the mindset. And if you look at all of these people, it's because we have missed the mark. We are not, because we are not living within the cultural confine, because we are not living within the dictates of our spirituality, we do not have a foundation to project out to the world. So you can only become liberated and pluralistically focused when you are living within the confines of your culture. Then you understand humanity. Then you will learn how to tolerate and understand, empathize with other people's culture. If not, you are just a loafer. And a loafer, a lone ranger, is not a human being. You must live within a group. That is what it takes to survive, whether in the human world, animal world, or plant world. In the plant world and animal world, they call it theory of density. The more populated a species is, the more likely they are to encroach on others and even dominate them. But in the human world, number does not dictate who dominates who, because if the human being is not just about mere number. The resilience of the human being is the power of the mind, and the power of the mind is more resilient if it exists within a group, and if you have group understanding. So not group think, but you have group understanding, there's solidarity. Then it becomes difficult for other population to encroach upon such individual. Example, you have a tiny country, not up to 6 million people, called Finland, but it fought against the mass Kabakan race of Russia and Germany for its own independence. All right. So the Russia will talk about just about 40 million people, and they have the biggest landmass in the world. I think they have border with US, border with Canada, Europe, India, China, Japan. So you can imagine a country stretching all the way from America, Europe, down to Asia. Landmass, there are not more than 40 million people. Yet there is no concrete of Russian land that has not been surveyed by Russian scientists and mastered. There's no concrete of Russian land that cannot be defended by Russians. So compared to other species, the human being is not determined by number. It's determined by self-realization within the group emancipation, group enlightenment. And that is exactly what is called society. Society is about a group of people, men and women and children, who have realized themselves as ecstatic freedom and are ready to understand themselves in tandem with the laws of nature, and they inculcate this laws of nature in establishing society, live by these laws, and these laws guide the human laws so that there will be a synergy within the human beings in the society itself, and nature. And with this, you can now have a platform, a vantage point to stand on, so that wherever you are in the world, you are projecting that perspective, that purview, that pricing, you project it. And then wherever you are, because you are projecting that pricing, you become a light to the world. Then you learn that you do not exist for yourself, you exist for your people. And if you exist for your people, you exist for humanity. So only then can the African stand to talk about having a voice in the world. That's exactly what Diba Chaja said this evening. And that is exactly what OKDB has been talking about all the while. That is what KK have been talking about. That's what all the liberated minds have talked about. When Fela sang, buy Africa. If we no buy ourselves, we no sell ourselves, who go buy us? Who go sell us? And then he went ahead to even sang it in Yoruba, Shetiwani mi ofe, Shetiwani mi ora. She na our own, I no buy. She na our own, I no want. And before you know, you say Aba made, Igbo made. You dismiss it.
Yep.
I was aware when I first came. My parents brought me to Lagos in 1984 when I finished my WAEC, and then I had to come to Lagos to start A level, 84, 85, and then the 84 there was street fair at Tafawa Balewa Square. All right. Then we went to Tafawa Balewa Square. We saw a solar-made car way back 1984. Solar car was made by Eddie Bongo's Motor here in Nigeria. Self-automated. The car was driven with a button. The button, the man would press the button, the car will move in the direction you wanted it. With sensor technology.
Before Tesla.
Yeah. So Babangida, the then president, did not come to trade fair to see that particular vehicle. But he went to Wharf the same year to see Malaysian first made car imported into the Nigerian Lagos Wharf.
Look at that.
That same year, 1984, a trade fair that held in Tafawa Balewa Square, 11 Motors made the bus. Then they made a tricycle far more superior, far more superior and stronger than all this Tinko being imported from India. Babangida did not come to see it. I did not patronize it. That's it. Shetiwani mi ò fẹ́, Shetiwani mi ò rà. Ṣé na wa o obonkan achon obonkan anemazo. Ṣé na wa o I know they buy. Ṣé na wa o I know what. And the one way go come from abroad. Now I want. So you say, this bag was sent to me, or I ordered it from England. I'm the only one that has it in the whole of Nigeria.
Bragging of something somebody else invented instead of yours.
So much so, Chinwendu wrote about Bintu. I was talking about black people when they meet, all they brag about is Bintu. I was the first one to get to US. When I got to the US, I was the first one to own a radio station. I was the first one to build a mansion. I was the first one to build a skyscraper. I was the first to buy my way to join Russian astronauts to get to the moon. You got to the moon. Me, I joined American astronauts. I went to Mars. Yeah. So you see, we keep bragging about individual achievement within the culture of other people.
Thank you. That's it right there in a nutshell.
No, we keep bragging of being what we are not within the confine of other people's culture. We call on other people's ancestors, so much so that those who have been to Israel for pilgrimage, some of them who are my students, say when they get there, some of the Jews ask them, you are always here calling our ancestors. Don't you people have ancestors?
Yeah. And the thing is, they were not even seeing it.
Yeah. So the Jew asked them, ask them, don't you people have ancestors? The River Jordan, they say the River Jordan is a holy, because of our gullibility, they take the water from the River Jordan, they cock it, and they warn you, don't let it touch your body. It's poisonous. That's the so-called holy water. And then they buy mustard seed. Some of them go to Israel, they buy me mustard seed. And they say, this is mustard seed. It's powerful. And I say, is this more powerful than my osoji, my alligator pepper? Then I Googled the mustard seed, what it does. I Googled the alligator pepper, what it does. Alligator pepper heals over 28 kinds of ailments.
Yeah.
Why mustard seed cannot do half of that?
True.
So you see, lack of group consciousness, group emancipation.
Yeah.
It's a disease for the individual, because the individual has no platform to stand, to project. That is the problem of the African.
Well said.
So you find that what has happened, like we have said on this program in the past, what has happened to the African is what you call crossbreeding, where you take a mango stem, you plant it, you bore a hole into a cashew stem and gravitate the mango stem in the cashew stem. So you grow, the mango grows, mango stem will grow mango, but will grow on the cashew stem, produce what looks like mango, but it tastes to be cashew.
Wow. Now that's tough right there, man. I love that analogy. We're almost at the end of the show, man. I appreciate your input.
So that's exactly what has happened to us. And we need to be taken out of this. So we need more of this program. But my happiness is that we are moving beyond talk to teaching.
Yes,
to having where people because talking, like, what if you don't have a place where you groom people, then you have places they can also now form a cluster to begin to practicalize this idea. Then it will appear as if we are talking to the air. It will not be like that in our lifetime. The dreams will be achieved in this lifetime, and so it will be.
Yeah, guys, you okay, madam? From your to into Chineke, you know, that's the dream, and we're going to do it. Let me say this: we're almost at the end of the show, and really appreciate you joining me. Dibia has been a little bit, challenged this morning.
Yeah.
So
she has been overworking herself.
She's been working too much, so we had to kind of accommodate her, state of being right now. Go ahead and do the show.
Please tell her to rest and rest very well, because she hardly rests.
Oh, man, there's a lot to do. We cannot afford, any one of us, me, you, her. We cannot afford any one of us to be physically challenged in any way, shape, or form.
That's what gave me my serious back pain. In fact, the doctor said I was lucky that some other people, it will have affected their lower part of their brain.
Okay.
But what happened? They said they don't know how it happened, that my brain kind of protected itself and transferred the aggression to the back. So it got to the back, and all the nerves, the spinal nerves connecting the arms got dislodged from their sockets.
Wow.
So much so that I was not feeling sensation in my arms anymore.
Wow. Well, that's what happens when you walk with Chineke.
Sure.
Sometimes your way of thinking, your attitude will bring in the right kind of spiritual aura that that will help you in your healing. Some people make it through sickness just because they feel in their mind that they have more to do before they go.
Sure.
And you invite that positive, this is DBS shape type conversation.
That's it.
You invite that spiritual entity that will help you inside heal, and you'll be able to fight off things, because the spirits have gathered and said, we're not ready for you yet. You still have some more work to do. When you're finished, because in the end, we're all going to go and join them. But not right now. Wait, but Rube, go and finish your work. The reason why you came into this world, go and finish it. Whatever that reason is, whatever influence you may have, go and finish it before you come. And hopefully, when you're coming here, you are now over the ancestral age of 80.
Sure.
Let me say this. A woman who brags about sleeping with many men will have difficulty finding a husband.
That's true.
When we're bragging of how successful we are outside of Nigeria, we'll have a hard time developing back home.
Sure.
Let's all think about this. It is nothing to brag about. I'm proud that we have these successes outside Nigeria, but it would be nice to have it outside and also have it inside. It would be nice that the outside success influences what goes on in our communities back home, so that they can marry one another as a strategy. I want to thank you, Dibia Chidozie, for joining me. I want to thank Dibia for giving us this opportunity to dialogue. Just you and I have our banter. I want to thank Ugochukwu Charles. Let's see, we have quite a few people that logged in here. my wife, my lovely wife, my dear Peabody, Akimi bro, Emeka, my son. Let me see. I got to scroll through here. VXBS, whoever you are. Rainy King Edits, JVST, Aka Chineke, so on and so forth. People that have joined us on different platforms. Thank you so much for being with us. Chukwu gozie unu. Yagazie.
Ndewonu.